There's an ancient saying that sounds simple at first glance, but the longer you live, the more chilling it becomes. There are people who don't need to do evil. Simply being near them is enough to subtly erode your good fortune little by little. The real fear doesn't lie in their obvious actions, but in that vague, unsettling feeling that can't be put into words. In life, everyone encounters people like this. They don't speak maliciously. They don't directly harm anyone. They even appear gentle, kind, and speak in a seemingly righteous way. But strangely, the longer you spend with them, the heavier your heart becomes. Your mind becomes confused. Your energy drains. Even after returning home, you still feel tired, uneasy, and as if something inexplicable has been sucked away from you. The ancients called them people with evil hearts, wearing a mask of kindness. They don't commit evil with knives or curses. They commit evil by sowing doubt, comparison, anxiety, feelings of inferiority, and instability in others. Being near them, we begin to doubt ourselves. We begin to feel inadequate. We begin to see life as heavier than it actually is. The most dangerous thing about this type of person is that they don't immediately raise our alarm. They don't inflict obvious harm. Everything happens very slowly, very subtly, like water seeping through a roof, a little bit each day. By the time we realize it, our good fortune has been depleted, our spirits are exhausted, and we still don't understand why we've become like this. The ancients taught that it's easy to avoid bad people when their true nature is revealed. But it's those with evil hearts who feign kindness that can unexpectedly lead one's life down a dark path. They might be very close. They could be friends. They could be colleagues. They could even be long-time acquaintances. And because of familiarity, respect, or fear, we stay, only to wonder why we become increasingly exhausted. If you've ever had that feeling being around someone and feeling uneasy, restless, thinking more and doubting more at night, perhaps it's not because you're weak. It could be your intuition speaking. Intuition is something the ancients highly valued because the heart knows before the intellect can comprehend. This video isn't intended to make you suspicious of everyone, nor does it teach you to distance yourself from or resent anyone. Its sole purpose is to help you learn how to identify, maintain appropriate distance, and protect your own good fortune. Because good fortune comes not only from doing good deeds, but also from avoiding energies that drain your mind. If you've ever felt tired for no apparent reason, or felt insecure around someone who seems very kind, stay until the end of this video. You might find the answer you're looking for. And if you want to learn together how to maintain inner peace, preserve destiny, and preserve blessings according to the teachings of the ancients, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Not to watch a lot, but so that each time you listen, you live more mindfully amidst the many masks of life. 1. According to ancient wisdom on judging people, there is a type of person who, while not openly committing evil or speaking harmful words, subtly diminishes the good fortune of others when around them. These are people who constantly scrutinize and control others, yet completely conceal their own inner thoughts. They are like silent shadows, never stepping into the light, but always observing every movement of others to manipulate the situation to their advantage. The ancients once said, "The more one observes others, the more one fears being seen through." Those who live uprightly and with clear minds usually don't need to scrutinize too much. They believe in karma and in themselves, so they don't constantly need to be on guard or control those around them. Only those who harbor insecurity, ulterior motives, or hidden agendas constantly scrutinize every word, action, and emotion of others. This scrutiny doesn't stem from genuine concern, but from a fear of losing control. Such people are often very skilled at disguising themselves. On the outside, they appear calm, attentive, understanding, even humble and kind. They ask very detailed questions. What are you thinking? What are you planning to do? Who are you close to? Are you dissatisfied with anything? But when you turn around and ask them, you'll notice something strange. They rarely speak clearly about themselves. Their answers are always vague, neutral, and safe. Their inner world is like a locked room, and you've inadvertently left yours wide open. Ancient people called this type of person outwardly bright, inwardly dark, bright and clear on the outside, but deeply secretive and unpredictable on the inside. They don't want to be seen through, because once they are, they lose their advantage. When you don't know what they truly want, fear, or think, they can easily manipulate your emotions and actions. Their silence is not harmless, but a form of soft power. What's noteworthy is that they rarely control others through commands or forceful imposition. They control through emotions, through their gaze, through subtle reactions. They gradually make you accustomed to explaining, forewarning, and paying attention to what they think of your decisions. Initially, you think it's respect, but over time, you realize you're no longer acting out of your own genuine desires, but because you don't want to upset them or change their expression. The ancients warned, when someone makes you shrink yourself to feel secure, that person has already surpassed you. The most dangerous control is not control of actions, but control of the state of mind. When your mind is no longer free, your blessings gradually dissipate without you even realizing it. Once upon a time, there was a story circulating among scholars. A young, intelligent, and upright official named Li Ming befriended a colleague named Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi was a man of few words, always listening attentively and meticulously inquiring about Li Ming's thoughts, plans, and relationships. Each time Li Ming shared something, Zhang Yi would nod in agreement, showing empathy. But when Li Ming asked about Zhang Yi's aspirations, he would only smile faintly, saying that he had no ambitions and was simply going with the flow. It was this carelessness that reassured Li Ming. He regarded Zhang Yi as a close friend, without any suspicion. But Li Ming didn't know that every word he said was being memorized, organized, and analyzed by Zhang Yi. When the court faced turmoil, Li Ming's private information was revealed at a sensitive time, putting him in a passive position and raising suspicions about his loyalty. The biggest beneficiary was Zhang Yi, someone who never revealed his own stance, yet possessed a thorough understanding of everyone's position. Later, when Li Ming was demoted, someone asked Zhang Yi how he managed to remain safe amidst the turmoil. He simply replied, "I only observed." Everything is predetermined by fate. The ancients, upon hearing this, sighed, "Those who conceal their true intentions while diligently probing others' hearts are not truly at a dead end." Being around such people makes it difficult for one's mind to be at peace. Because you are constantly being watched, prolonged observation leads to stress. Stress leads to fatigue. Fatigue leads to self-doubt. And when a person begins to doubt themselves, their vital energy weakens. According to ancient beliefs, when vital energy is weak, blessings are difficult to accumulate. Blessings don't disappear naturally. They are gradually eroded through relationships that cause inner turmoil. Therefore, the ancients advised against exposing or confronting this type of person. Confrontation only makes them reveal themselves sooner and become more dangerous. The wisest approach is to maintain boundaries. Say just enough, not everything. Communicate politely, but don't get too involved. Don't over-explain your personal choices. Don't put yourself in a position where you have to prove yourself or please them. When you don't provide them with data to analyze, they will gradually lose interest in controlling you. When you live a stable life, free from the influence of others, you protect your own energy and good fortune. The ancients taught, keep your mind at peace, and good fortune will come. A disturbed mind will lose its blessings. Recognizing those who are constantly scrutinizing and controlling, but hide their true feelings isn't about fostering fear or suspicion, but about learning how to protect yourself. Not everyone deserves your complete openness. Some people should only be treated with courtesy. Maintaining distance isn't coldness, but wisdom. If you've ever felt tired or uneasy around someone, without understanding why, it's very likely your heart has sensed something your mind hasn't yet identified. Trust that feeling. The intuition of a virtuous person is rarely wrong. Maintaining inner peace is maintaining blessings in your life. 2. In the ancients' warnings about human nature, there is a particularly dangerous type of person, not because they commit obvious evil deeds, but because of the constant suspicion in their hearts. These are people who don't trust anyone, always doubting everything, even without evidence. Being near them, you won't be directly attacked, but your mind will gradually be worn down by the constant feeling of having to be on guard, to explain, and to prove your own innocence. The ancients once said, "Those who don't trust others do so primarily because they don't trust themselves." A person with inner peace and integrity tends to believe in the good intentions of others, at least until there's a clear reason to doubt. Conversely, those who are always suspicious often harbor deep-seated fears. Fear of betrayal, fear of being exploited, fear of losing control. This fear causes them to view the world through a dark lens, where every good deed can be deceptive, and every kind word conceals ulterior motives. What's noteworthy is that this suspicion is rarely expressed directly. They don't accuse you or criticize you openly. Instead, they express it through subtle signs: scrutinizing glances, roundabout questions, unusual silences, or a cold attitude after you've just done something good. They might ask the same question repeatedly, not because they don't understand, but because they want to see if you've slipped up or contradicted something. Every word you say becomes potential evidence in their minds, even if you are completely innocent. Ancient wisdom holds that suspicion is the poison of the human heart. It not only ruins relationships, but also destroys the person who harbors it. When a person lives in constant suspicion, their mind never finds rest. When the mind is restless, the spirit is restless. When the spirit is restless, the body is prone to illness, and fortune is easily diminished. Therefore, many suspicious people often live in a state of fatigue and stress, even though outwardly they may appear calm and rational. Being around such people, you gradually lose your natural composure. You start carefully considering every word and action, fearing misunderstanding or being accused of ulterior motives. Initially, you think it's because you're not tactful enough. But gradually, you realize, no matter how straightforward you are, they will always find reasons to be suspicious. Because the problem isn't your behavior, but their inner thoughts. An ancient saying goes, "A person with a suspicious heart will see ghosts even in broad daylight." When the heart is filled with doubt, the world automatically becomes frightening. A smile can be interpreted as fake. Silence can be seen as concealment. The success of others can be considered manipulative. Suspicious people don't need proof, because they trust their own fears more than the truth. Once upon a time, there was a story recorded in unofficial historical texts. There was a wealthy merchant named Han Fu, but he was notoriously suspicious. He didn't trust anyone, not even relatives or longtime associates. Whatever he assigned a task, he always had people monitoring each other. Money was checked repeatedly. He always analyzed what others said in the most unfavorable light. If someone did well, he suspected they were hiding something. If someone made a small mistake, he immediately suspected them of having ulterior motives. Initially, people tried to prove their loyalty, but over time, they grew weary. Talented individuals left one by one because no one wanted to live their whole life under suspicion. Those who remained were either incompetent or had learned to conceal their true intentions and cope. In his later years, Han Fu was wealthy but lonely, with no one truly loyal by his side. Before his death, he sighed and said, "I trusted no one, so no one stayed with me." The ancients concluded this story with a very short statement: suspicion leads to losing people. The danger of this type of person lies not only in the fact that they hurt others, but also in the fact that they spread suspicion. Spending too much time with them, you too begin to learn to doubt. Doubt others, doubt circumstances, and ultimately, doubt yourself. Your heart is no longer as pure as before. Your good fortune diminishes as a result, because according to ancient beliefs, good fortune only lasts for those with a peaceful mind and fundamental faith in life. Our ancestors didn't teach us to naively trust people unconditionally. Intelligence doesn't equate to gullibility, but there's a clear line between caution and suspicion. Caution is based on observation and evidence. Suspicion is based on fear and speculation. A cautious person knows when to stop when they don't have enough facts. A suspicious person always concludes negatively, even without proof. Therefore, when you realize you're near someone who is always unreasonably suspicious, the ancients advised maintaining a safe distance. There's no need to argue to prove you right, because suspicious people aren't seeking the truth. They're seeking reassurance for their fears, and you can't cure their fears for them. The more you explain, the deeper you'll be drawn into their spiral of suspicion. Maintaining boundaries in sharing, being clear in actions, and remaining calm in attitude are the best ways to protect yourself. Don't let your mind be burdened with worries that don't belong to you. As the ancients taught, when others' minds are troubled, do not let your own mind be troubled as well. Recognizing those who are always suspicious, even without evidence, isn't about extreme contempt or avoidance, but about knowing not to place your trust and energy in the wrong place. Maintaining a clear mind amidst darkness and inner peace among the suspicious, that is true strength. When your mind isn't drawn into the fears of others, good fortune can reside within you for the long term. 3. Among the types of people that the ancients advised against, there is one that is very subtle and difficult to recognize. This is the person who is always curious about the private lives of others, but absolutely never opens up and tells the truth about themselves. They ask many questions, know a lot about the lives of those around them, but when it comes to themselves, everything is vague, evasive, or told in an extremely safe way. Being near this type of person won't hurt you immediately, but your good fortune will silently diminish without you even realizing it. Ancient wisdom teaches that a virtuous person communicates to understand and empathize, while a petty person communicates to gather information and control. The difference lies not in the words themselves, but in the underlying motives. Those who like to know other people's private lives aren't necessarily doing so out of genuine concern, but rather to gain information. Knowing more about you gives them a sense of superiority and control. However, by not sharing the truth about themselves, they maintain a protective shield, avoiding being seen through. Initially, they often appear very approachable. They listen attentively, ask timely questions, making you feel understood. You gradually open up, sharing your worries, hurts, and unfinished plans. Meanwhile, they only tell superficial stories, things from long ago, or carefully edited versions. This exchange seems balanced, but it's actually one-sided. You're giving the truth, while they're only giving harmless information. Ancient people viewed this as a sign of someone with an impure heart. It's not because they're keeping secrets, because everyone has the right to privacy. The problem lies in their proactively prying into other people's lives without accepting reciprocity. Such communication isn't connection, it's exploitation. A relationship lacking genuine sincerity will sooner or later lead to one party becoming exhausted and the other gaining control. Such people are often very good at making you forget you're being asked too many questions. They speak in a gentle tone, interspersed with empathy, sometimes even compliments. But after each conversation, if you pay close attention, you'll find yourself talking more, revealing more, while they remain a blurry figure. You know they enjoy listening to other people's stories, but you don't know what they really think, what they fear, or how they're living. An ancient saying goes that those who dare not speak the truth about themselves often have something to hide. It doesn't necessarily have to be something terrible, but could be insecurity, low self-esteem, or a conflicted inner life. Instead of confronting themselves, they direct their attention outward. Knowing about others helps them temporarily forget the emptiness in their hearts. But over time, this habit becomes a way of life. Once upon a time, there was a story passed down among the literati. There was a man named Lupian, renowned for his extensive knowledge. He knew everything that happened in the village. He knew who was sad, who was suffering, and who had family conflicts. Initially, people respected him because they thought he understood life and people. But strangely, no one really knew anything about Lupian's private life. He never spoke about his family, his worries, or his past failures. Over time, the stories Luan heard began to spread in different ways. No one knew if he did it intentionally or not, but private matters gradually became topics of gossip. People in the village became wary, no longer daring to share the truth. When a major crisis occurred, Luan realized he had no one left to confide in. He knew a lot about others, but no one truly knew who he was. The ancients concluded that those who gather too much private information about others without sharing their own truth will sooner or later isolate themselves. The danger of this type of person doesn't lie in their direct words, but in the long-term consequences. When you get used to sharing with them, you inadvertently place your inner life in the hands of someone who isn't open. This creates an energy imbalance. You feel lighter while speaking, but afterward you feel empty, even insecure. You don't know where your words will go, whether they will be kept or used in some way. Ancient people highly valued trustworthiness in communication. Trustworthiness is not just about keeping promises, but also about the balance between giving and receiving. If in a relationship only one person speaks the truth, while the other merely listens and remembers, it ceases to be a genuine friendship and becomes a game of chance. Those with upright hearts are not afraid to share within appropriate limits. They don't tell everything, but what they say is true. Those with wicked hearts are the opposite. They tell many things but don't tell the truth. They listen a lot but don't forget. Spending a long time near such a person, you'll feel like you're being seen through while you can't see back. That feeling makes your heart uneasy. According to ancient beliefs, good fortune is averse to subtle unease. Good fortune thrives in open spaces where communication is clear and where people don't need to be on guard. Our ancestors didn't teach us to completely close off our hearts. Instead, they taught us to observe the balance. If you're always the one sharing more, opening up more, while the other person keeps their distance, slow down. No need to blame, no need to expose. Just stop revealing more private details. Keeping some things to yourself is preserving your own happiness. Kind-hearted people, when asking about others' personal lives, usually accompany their questions with appropriate sharing. They talk about themselves not to show off, but to create a sense of security for the other person. Those who only ask questions without ever telling the truth usually seek information rather than empathy. When you recognize this, you're already halfway to enlightenment. The ancients once said that speaking one's truth is a form of courage. Those who dare not speak the truth often live in a defensive posture, and those who live in defensiveness for a long time find it difficult to achieve happiness. Therefore, staying away from or keeping your distance from this type of person is not because they are obviously evil, but because being near them makes it difficult for your mind to remain at peace for long. Keep your heart pure, speak sparingly, and only share the truth with those who also dare to live truthfully. That is how the ancients taught us to preserve blessings amidst a world full of masks. 4. Among the types of people that the ancients considered to silently diminish others' good fortune, there is one particularly dangerous type because it is very difficult to grasp. This is the person who sows doubt through half-truths and half-lies. They don't lie completely, nor do they tell the whole truth. Their words are like an ambiguous seed, falling into the hearts of others and silently sprouting into unease, suspicion, and division. Ancient wisdom warns that while blunt words can be painful, they are easier to heal, while ambiguous words cause lasting emotional turmoil. Those who speak half-truths and half-lies are often very skillful. They neither affirm nor deny. They merely hint, or utter a seemingly casual remark that is enough to make the listener ponder. A phrase like, "I'm not sure, but I heard that," or "I'm just telling you, I wouldn't dare confirm it," opens the door for the imagination and fears of others to run wild. The danger lies in the fact that when something goes wrong, they always have a way out. If you believe them, and a misunderstanding occurs, they can say they never made that claim. If you doubt them, they'll feign innocence, saying they only heard it somewhere and shared it. The ancients called this irresponsible speech. The speaker doesn't suffer the consequences, but the listener bears the anxiety and emotional distress. Those who sow doubt through half-truths and half-lies usually don't directly attack anyone. They only place a question mark in your heart. That question mark is initially very small, but if it falls on a weak or anxious mind, it will grow larger. You begin to see others differently. You doubt good intentions, doubt actions, even doubt things you previously believed to be pure. From then on, your mind is no longer at peace. Ancient people viewed this as a subtle form of evil, not because they caused harm through overt actions, but because they disrupted trust between people. And trust, according to ancient beliefs, is the foundation of good fortune. Where there is trust, there is peace. Where suspicion is widespread, good fortune is difficult to accumulate. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a man named To-Do. He never quarreled with anyone, nor did he speak ill of anyone directly. But whenever two close friends were together, he would inadvertently utter an ambiguous remark. When he saw two families interacting intimately, he would say that he heard the other family had not been very good in the past. When he saw someone who was trusted by everyone, he would sigh and say that this person might seem harmless, but it was hard to tell. He offered no evidence, only a feeling. Initially, no one paid attention, but gradually, suspicious glances began to appear in the village. People became wary of each other. Relationships that were once harmonious became distant. When conflicts arose, To-Do's words were remembered as a prophecy. People began to believe that he was far-sighted. But in the end, when the village faced a major crisis requiring unity, no one trusted each other enough to stand together. At that time, people realized that those half-truths, half-lies from years ago had eroded shared trust. The ancients concluded that those who sow doubt may remain uninvolved in disputes, but the consequences of division will sooner or later return to them. Such people often justify their actions by saying they only spoke part of the truth or simply shared what they heard. But the ancients taught that speaking the truth without a good heart also creates negative karma, because words not only carry meaning, but also intention. If the intention is to sow confusion, even if the words are partially true, they still harm one's blessings. Being around this type of person will gradually weigh down your heart. You no longer fully trust anyone. You have to check, scrutinize, and be on guard. Living like this for a long time will exhaust your mind and deplete your energy. According to ancient beliefs, good fortune is strongly averse to this state. Good fortune thrives in places of clarity, where words are straightforward, and where hearts are not drawn into ambiguity. The ancients did not advise us to refute or expose those who sow doubt. Arguing with such people is usually futile. They always find a way to say you misunderstood them. What the ancients advised was to keep a clear mind. When hearing ambiguous words, do not immediately believe them, nor rush to spread them. Do not let unclear words become seeds in your heart. Maintaining virtue sometimes isn't about doing more, but about not letting half-truths and half-falsehoods linger in your mind for too long. A wise person hears something and lets it go, without harboring any further interpretations. A person who practices virtue knows that unverified doubt only disturbs their own mind before harming others. The ancients once said that words are a double-edged sword, but ambiguous words are like a hidden knife. They don't inflict immediate harm, but by the time they're pulled out, it's too late. Identifying those who sow doubt through half-truths and half-lies is a crucial step in maintaining a clear mind. Not everyone deserves our complete attention, and not everything we hear is worth believing. Maintaining composure amidst ambiguous words and not allowing ourselves to become fertile ground for suspicion is the wisdom of our ancestors in preserving our blessings in a turbulent world. 5. In the ancient teachings on preserving fortune and destiny, there is a type of person frequently mentioned for their insidious destructive power. These are people who constantly gossip and speak ill of others behind their backs. They don't directly cause harm through major actions, but their words are like muddy water, polluting the air wherever they go. The ancients once said that the mouth is the gateway to fortune and misfortune. Fortune or misfortune largely stems from words. Those who habitually gossip often harbor feelings of insecurity, envy, or inner emptiness. When they lack inner peace, they seek to fill that void with the stories of others. Instead of reflecting on their own hearts, they use others' faults for entertainment and their mistakes to elevate themselves. Those who gossip behind others' backs rarely admit to being bad people. They often justify their actions by saying they're just speaking the truth, offering constructive criticism for fun, or sharing information so others can avoid similar mistakes. But the ancients saw deeper. The issue isn't the content of the story, but the motive behind the words. If those words aren't meant to help someone correct their mistakes or protect someone, but merely to satisfy their own emotions, then even if they're true, they still create negative karma. Being around this type of person, you'll find the atmosphere strangely heavy. Initially, you might be drawn in by the feeling of knowing the story, of being an insider. But the more you listen, the more uneasy you become. You start looking at others with suspicion. You wonder if they're saying the same things behind your back. Trust between people is thus fractured. Ancient wisdom holds that those who speak ill of others behind their backs are often incapable of facing confrontation directly. They fear real conflict and responsibility, so they choose a roundabout path. Speaking behind someone's back satisfies their emotions while avoiding immediate consequences. However, the price they pay is a gradual decline in good fortune, as their hearts are no longer pure and upright. Once upon a time, there was a story passed down through generations. In a certain village, there lived a woman who was an excellent storyteller. She knew the affairs of almost every household, from marital conflicts to business failures. Every afternoon, people would gather around her to listen. At first, it was just light-hearted gossip, but gradually, her words caused misunderstandings, suspicion, and division. Some once peaceful families became feuds because of her rumors. When disaster struck the village, no one trusted each other enough to work together. Towards the end of her life, the woman lived in solitude. No one dared to confide in her anymore, and no one truly wanted to be close to her. She knew many things about other people, but no one wanted to share their own stories with her anymore. The ancients concluded that those who find pleasure in gossip and slander ultimately find only loneliness. Gossip not only harms the person being talked about, but also the listener. Every time you hear a negative comment, if you're not mindful, you've allowed a piece of garbage to fall into your heart. Initially, it's just a small thought, but over time, your mind becomes tainted. Ancient people believed that blessings don't reside in a heart full of garbage. Blessings are found only in a pure heart, kind words, and righteous intentions. Those who constantly gossip are also very likely to reveal their true nature when circumstances change. When they face difficulties, they will blame others. When they succeed, they will belittle others. Their words always revolve around discrimination, comparison, and judgment. This shows that their inner selves have never truly been at peace. Ancient wisdom teaches that virtuous people do not dwell on the faults of others, but rather focus on self-improvement. They understand that every unnecessary word consumes vital energy. Speaking ill of others may bring fleeting pleasure, but the price is long-lasting unease. When surrounded by gossip mongers, the best approach isn't to refute or condemn, but to remain silent. Silence, changing the subject, or quietly leaving is the best way to preserve your own well-being. When you don't fuel gossip, it will naturally die out. As the ancients said, a fire goes out without fuel. Similarly, gossip disappears without a listener. More importantly, observe yourself. If you find yourself gradually finding pleasure in hearing other people's stories, that's when you need to stop. Not to blame yourself, but to return to cultivating inner peace. A pure heart produces pure words. Pure words lead to a lighter life. The ancients reminded us that a virtuous person says what needs to be said, while a petty person says what they want to say. Those who speak ill of others behind their backs often speak based on emotion, not morality. Recognizing this type of person and avoiding being drawn into their web of gossip and slander is a profound way to preserve one's blessings, a lesson passed down from our ancestors. 6. Among the types of people that the ancients particularly warned against, there is one that is very difficult to recognize because they always wear a facade of kindness and goodwill. These are people who use words of concern to sow discord in relationships. They don't attack directly, they don't speak ill of others outright, but instead use the guise of worry and love to undermine trust between people. Because of this seemingly good appearance, the harm they inflict is often subtle but profound. The ancients once said that words stemming from the heart will lead the listener in that direction. When the heart is not pure, no matter how gentle the words, they still carry a poisonous nature. Those who use words of concern to sow discord often begin with very gentle statements. They say they are only worried about you. They claim they are speaking out of fear that you might be harmed. They warn you to be careful with the other person, because things are not as simple as they seem. Everything is wrapped in a veneer of goodwill, making it difficult for the listener to refute them. The danger lies in the fact that they don't offer clear conclusions. They only suggest. They don't say the other person is bad. They just say you should be aware. This ambiguity causes the listener's heart to waver. You don't have enough facts to believe them, but you also don't feel secure enough to ignore them. A seed of doubt is sown, and from there, cracks begin to appear in a previously stable relationship. Ancient wisdom holds that those who genuinely care will help others gain clarity and peace of mind after a conversation. Conversely, those who feign concern will only confuse, burden, and unsettle the listener. If, after each conversation, you find yourself becoming suspicious of those close to you and becoming defensive in your relationships, it's a sign worth reflecting upon. Once upon a time, there was a story passed down among students. Two close friends studied under the same teacher. They had a very good relationship, always helping each other in their studies and in life. There was a third person in the class who seemed to care about both of them. This person would often seek them out individually, saying how worried they were. When he met the first, he said that their friend seemed secretive lately, and they should be careful not to be taken advantage of. When he met the second, he said that their friend seemed to be engaging in unfair competition. Initially, neither believed it. But because those words were repeated under the guise of concern, they began to notice each other's small actions. A silence was misinterpreted. An unintentional act was interpreted as calculated. Gradually, they drifted apart without realizing it. Only when both failed a major exam did they have the chance to sit down and realize that their relationship had been broken not by betrayal, but by misplaced words of concern. The person who sowed the discord had long since left, leaving two people filled with regret. Ancient wisdom concludes that those who use words of concern to sow discord often have restless hearts. They cannot bear to see others close, trusting, and happy together. The closeness of others makes them feel left out. Instead of cultivating their inner selves to integrate, they choose to drag others down into the same state of doubt as themselves. When the relationships around them fracture, they feel less alone. This type of person rarely appears in a villainous role. They are usually good listeners, comforters, or mediators. But it is precisely this position that allows them to whisper different things into each ear. They don't say things that are completely wrong, but neither do they say things that are entirely right. They only choose the parts that can shake people's beliefs. Spending a long time around such people, you'll find it hard to completely trust anyone. You start harboring suspicions. You no longer speak frankly with loved ones as before, because there's a different voice in your head. According to ancient beliefs, good fortune is averse to this state. Good fortune requires clarity and trust. Where words are no longer direct, good fortune is difficult to accumulate. The ancients advised against hastily condemning or confronting this type of person. They can always claim they only care about your well-being. The more important thing is to learn to listen to your own feelings. If a word of concern brings you peace and clarity, it's well-intentioned. If a word of concern makes you more confused and suspicious, it's something to stop doing. Maintaining happiness sometimes means knowing how to distinguish between genuine concern and divisive words. A person who truly cares will advise direct dialogue, clarify misunderstandings, and preserve the relationship. A person with false concern will only speak behind your back, sow doubt, and then observe from the sidelines. Ancient wisdom teaches that kind words bring people closer together, not farther apart. When you realize someone is using words of concern to create distance, the best way to protect yourself is to prevent those words from deeply affecting you. Don't rush to believe, don't rush to spread, and if necessary, engage in direct dialogue with the person involved. Transparency is the most powerful antidote to all division. Maintaining a pure heart amidst ambiguous words of concern is the key to preserving blessings. For blessings are not found in sweet words, but in an honest heart and a peaceful mind. 7. Among the types of people that the ancients considered to bring the most misfortune, there is one who doesn't need to commit great evils or plot harm against anyone, but whose attitude alone is enough to chill others to the bone. These are the people who laugh at and mock the suffering of others. They turn pain into a joke, injury into a topic of amusement, and use their laughter to mask their inner lack of humanity. The ancients taught that compassion is the foundation of being human. Those who lack empathy for the suffering of others, no matter how talented, will find it difficult to sustain their good fortune. Good fortune arises from kindness, while laughing at the suffering of others directly dries up that source. That laughter may only last for a moment, but its lingering impact leaves a lasting wound in the hearts of those who hear it. Those who mock suffering often consider themselves strong and experienced. They believe everyone is responsible for their own fate, and therefore the pain of others is not worth empathizing with. But the ancients saw things differently. They believed that life is impermanent. Today someone else is suffering, but tomorrow it may not be your turn. Laughing at the suffering of others is like cutting off your own path back when misfortune strikes. Being around this type of person, you'll feel an indescribable chill. At first, you might think they're just joking, just saying things to brush it off. But if you pay close attention, you'll see they don't know when to stop. When someone shares a loss, instead of listening, they offer sarcasm. When someone stumbles, they turn that story into an anecdote. The pain of others becomes material for them to show off their intelligence or superiority. Ancient people considered this a manifestation of arrogance and insensitivity. A compassionate person, upon hearing sad news, will automatically lower their voice. An inhumane person, upon hearing sad news, will laugh. That laughter is not joy, but a detachment from the emotions of others. Over time, this detachment not only distances them from others, but also from the humane part of themselves. Once upon a time, in a certain school, there was a student named Zhao Lin. He was a brilliant student with sharp wit, attracting much attention. Whenever a fellow student faced misfortune, Zhou Lin would often make sarcastic remarks. When someone failed an exam due to financial difficulties, he would laugh and say, was due to incompetence. When someone lost a loved one and neglected their studies, he would say they were using tragedy as an excuse. Initially, many laughed along, finding him clever. But gradually, the school became cold and desolate. No one dared to share their true feelings. Everyone feared becoming the next target of ridicule. When Zhao Lin himself experienced a major family tragedy, he felt true pain for the first time. He sought out those he had once mocked, but no one was close enough to offer comfort. Not because they wanted revenge, but because of the distance he had created long ago. The ancients concluded that those who laugh at the suffering of others will ultimately bear their own pain in solitude. The danger of this type of person lies not only in their words, but in the energy they carry. They make the space around them lose its emotional safety. When no one dares to be vulnerable, no one dares to speak the truth, relationships become superficial. Good fortune, according to the ancients, requires warmth. Where there is a lack of empathy, good fortune is difficult to maintain. The ancients once said that a timely word of comfort can save a life, while an ill-timed mockery can kill the humanity within someone. Virtuous people understand the weight of words, and therefore they are cautious when faced with the suffering of others. They know that silence is sometimes a form of kindness, while mockery is always a form of psychological violence. When you're around people who mock your pain, the way to protect yourself isn't to argue or lecture them, because insensitive people often don't see themselves as wrong. The important thing is to keep your distance to protect your own heart. Don't share your vulnerability with people who don't appreciate it. Don't expect empathy from someone who has never learned to empathize. Ancient wisdom teaches that a truly blessed person is not someone who has never suffered, but someone who does not inflict pain on others. When you learn not to laugh at someone's tears, you have already reserved a great deal of blessings for yourself. And when you realize who is making fun of someone's pain, distancing yourself from them is not an act of coldness, but an act of self-respect. To keep one's heart soft amidst a harsh world, to keep one's heart warm among cold people, this is the way our ancestors passed down to preserve lasting happiness in a world full of changes. 8. Among the types of people that the ancients particularly warned against, there is a form of evil that is very difficult to recognize: those who make fun of the misfortunes of others. They don't directly harm anyone, nor do they act cruelly, but they use the pain of others for amusement, to tell stories, to lighten their own hearts. It is this very lightness that silently erodes the blessings of both sides, the one being ridiculed and the one doing the laughing. The ancients taught that misfortune is the deepest part of each person's life. To make fun of it is like trampling on the most vulnerable spot in the human heart. Those who do so often think they are just joking, just making light of things. But the ancients did not look at the surface of the words, but at the intentions in the heart. When the heart no longer feels the pain of others, sooner or later, it will become cold and unfortunate. People who make fun of others' misfortunes usually exhibit two behaviors. First, they recount the suffering of others in a humorous tone, embellishing details to provoke laughter. Second, upon seeing someone in trouble, they immediately compare themselves to, belittle, or use sarcasm to show that they are smarter or luckier. This laughter doesn't stem from genuine joy, but from a feeling of superiority. The ancients called this the mentality of winning and losing. When a person only feels relieved when others suffer more than themselves, their inner self is already impoverished. They need the misfortune of others to fill their own insecurity. But the more they do this, the more barren their hearts become. For happiness does not come from comparing oneself to the less fortunate, but from compassion for the suffering of humanity. Being around this type of person, you'll sense an unsettling unease. They might laugh and chat boisterously, but that smile always makes others wary. You don't dare share your sadness. You don't dare show vulnerability, for fear that one day your pain will become a topic of amusement. As a result, relationships lack security and depth. The ancients believed that where people are afraid to be themselves, good fortune is unlikely to gather. Once upon a time, there was a man named Han Yu, renowned for his quick wit and sharp tongue. Whenever someone in the village experienced misfortune, Han Yu was always the first to recount it, but always with a humorous twist. He would make jokes about crop failures and call the misfortunes of others life lessons. At first, many found it amusing and laughed along. Because of this, Han Yu was considered a glib speaker, skilled at livening up the atmosphere. But gradually, no one in the village wanted to share their personal troubles anymore. Those who suffered silently endured their misfortune, fearing that the next day, the whole village would laugh at their pain. When Han Yu himself faced a major setback, his son fell seriously ill, and his fortune was squandered. He truly felt the loneliness. Those who had once laughed with him now only watched from afar. No one mocked him, but no one offered comfort either. Because in their hearts, Han Yu had never been someone who knew how to empathize with the suffering of others. The ancients said that it's not punishment from others, but the karmic consequences of one's own actions. When someone is accustomed to viewing misfortune with a mocking gaze, they have severed their ability to connect deeply with others. When empathy is needed, they have no bridge left to return to. Making fun of others' misfortunes is also a form of ignorance about impermanence. Those who laugh today forget that life changes very quickly. The pain they take lightly today may be a lesson for them tomorrow. The ancients often said, seeing someone suffer and feeling compassion is accumulating merit for oneself. Seeing someone suffer and making fun of them is squandering merit without realizing it. Even more dangerous, this type of person often puts on a facade of being carefree and frank. They claim they're only speaking the truth, only joking for fun. But the ancients clearly distinguished between honesty and cruelty. Honesty is done with good intentions, while cruelty is not. When words cause further pain to others, even if masked by laughter, they are still malicious words. When faced with this type of person, the ancients advised neither confrontation nor lecturing, because those who make fun of pain rarely see themselves as wrong. The most important thing is to know how to stay away and protect your own heart. Don't share your vulnerabilities with those who lack compassion. Don't expect sympathy from someone who only knows how to laugh at the tears of others. Ancient wisdom teaches that preserving blessings is not only about doing good deeds, but also about not hurting others when they are at their weakest. A well-timed silence is worth more than 100 kind words. A sympathetic nod is worth more than 1,000 thoughtless laughs. When you don't take pleasure in someone else's misfortune, you create a great space of peace within your heart, a space where blessings can reside for a long time. In a world full of turmoil, those who empathize with the suffering of others have transcended the rough edges of human nature. And when you realize someone is always laughing at the misfortunes of others, quietly distancing yourself from them is not a sign of weakness, but the choice of someone who understands the way, avoiding evil thoughts to maintain inner peace and lasting blessings for yourself. 9. Among the manifestations of evil that the ancients particularly feared, there is a very common form that few people recognize: constant excuses and refusal to admit fault. This type of person isn't as boisterous as a gossip, nor as cold-hearted as someone who mocks suffering, but they silently erode morality and deeply damage relationships around them. The ancients said, knowing one's mistakes and correcting them brings good fortune. Denying one's mistakes cuts off one's own path to advancement. A person who refuses to admit their mistakes, whether small or large, is often not blind, but afraid to confront their own errors. To protect their image, they choose to distort the truth, twist the facts, and call it reason. People who frequently make excuses are often very eloquent. When their mistakes are pointed out, they immediately offer external circumstances, reasons, and causes. If they don't blame others, they'll blame fate, the times, or everyone else is like that. Their mistakes are rarely genuine. They're always attributed to circumstances forcing them. While this sounds plausible, the longer you listen, the more weary and disillusioned you become. The ancients feared not those who made mistakes, but those who refused to stop and examine their own hearts. For mistakes are a matter of action, while denying them is a matter of character. When a person becomes accustomed to making excuses, they gradually lose the ability to reflect. Their mind leaves no room for learning, correcting, or growing. Therefore, blessings are difficult to accumulate, while misfortunes are easily borne. There's an old story about a clerk named Li Xin. Li Xin was intelligent, had excellent writing skills, and worked quickly, so he was highly trusted by his superiors. But he had one flaw. He never admitted his mistakes. Whenever an error occurred in the records, he always tried to prove that he had done it correctly, or that the error was caused by someone else. If he couldn't blame anyone, he would cite complicated procedures, contradictory orders, or objective circumstances. Initially, people debated with him. Later, they chose silence. Not because Li Xin was right, but because speaking up was pointless. Gradually, no one wanted to work with him, and no one offered sincere advice anymore. When a major mistake occurred, causing significant losses to the court, Li Xin continued his usual sophistry. But this time, no one stood up to defend him. He was dismissed from his position, not just for his mistakes, but because he no longer had the credibility to bear the responsibility. The ancients clearly saw that those who don't admit their mistakes won't gain lasting trust. Because in every relationship, from family and friends to work, what keeps people together isn't perfection, but honesty when wrong. A timely "I was wrong" can save an entire relationship. Conversely, 100 excuses only widen the gap. People with this kind of malicious heart often hurt others without realizing it. They may do wrong, but they cause those affected to doubt themselves. When you offer advice, they contradict you. When you express your feelings clearly, they call you too sensitive. Over time, you will find yourself tired, wary, and no longer daring to speak the truth. The ancients called this emotional wound, a silent but very deep injury. More dangerously, prolonged sophistry becomes a habit. Such a person not only deceives others, but also deceives themselves. They believe they are always right, always have a justifiable reason. At that point, the lines between good and evil in their heart begin to twist. What is wrong is no longer wrong. What is right is no longer right. Only what benefits the ego remains. From there, evil doesn't need grand actions. It grows daily in their words. Ancient wisdom teaches that a person who cultivates virtue is not someone who never makes mistakes, but someone who dares to bow their head before the truth. Bowing one's head does not diminish a person, but helps broaden the mind. A person who dares to admit their mistakes retains the light within their heart. A person who habitually makes excuses is blinding themselves and will sooner or later lose their way. Being around people who never admit their mistakes makes it difficult to accumulate good fortune. Such people lack humility, learning, and lasting peace. Ancient wisdom advises against arguing about right and wrong with such individuals, and even less about trying to awaken them. The most important thing is to maintain a reasonable distance, keeping your mind from being drawn into the cycle of justification, blame, and hurt. To judge whether a person has a good heart, observe how they confront their mistakes. A person who dares to admit their wrongdoing has a path to redemption. A person who constantly makes excuses is locking that door from the inside. Understanding this, you will know why the ancients considered admitting mistakes not a sign of weakness, but the first sign of wisdom and lasting virtue. 10. Among the 10 manifestations of evil in the heart that the ancients always warned their descendants to be wary of, blaming circumstances, others, or fate is considered a very dangerous sign, because it is not noisy or sharp, but it erodes good fortune from the root. There's an old saying, when faced with a problem, if you don't examine yourself, you'll inevitably blame heaven and others. When someone habitually blames others, they are not only avoiding responsibility, but also relinquishing control over their own lives. Because once all mistakes are attributed to external circumstances, they have nothing left to correct, nothing to learn, nothing left to grow from. These types of people often complain that they were born into unfavorable circumstances, that their family didn't support them, that others obstructed their path, that society was unjust, that fate had decreed it. At first glance, they seem pitiable. But after listening for a while, you realize one thing: they've never truly looked inward. Their minds are accustomed to looking outward, seeking causes everywhere except within themselves. The ancients did not deny that circumstances influence a person's life. But a person with a kind heart always asks, "Where did I go wrong in this matter?" While a person with an evil heart asks, "Who caused me suffering?" These two questions determine two completely different paths. One accumulates merit, the other accumulates resentment. There's an old story about Duck, a man of great learning, but who had a life full of misfortune. Duck failed the imperial examinations many times, and everything he did was left unfinished. Each time he failed, he would lament. The exams were unfair, the officials were biased, and his friends weren't helpful. Someone advised him to reconsider his approach to learning and living, but he dismissed it, saying, "If I had been born into a wealthy and powerful family, would things have turned out this way?" In the village lived another man named En, whose education was inferior to Chun Yu's, and who also came from a poor background. However, every time he failed an exam or made a mistake, En quietly corrected himself, studied harder, and started over. Years later, En was highly regarded, while Chun Yu remained stuck with his old complaints. This wasn't due to favoritism, but because one dared to take responsibility, while the other was accustomed to shirking it. The ancients saw it very clearly. Blaming others for a long time breeds resentment. Accumulated resentment leads to a restless mind, which in turn leads to harsh words, gloomy eyes, and erratic behavior. At that point, people not only cause themselves suffering, but also wear down those around them. Being near someone who constantly blames life makes you feel burdened, because their energy is always dragging you down, never uplifting you. Even more dangerously, those who constantly blame others are often very good at playing the victim. They make others feel guilty and sorry for them. But in reality, it's a way of avoiding maturity. The ancients called this a weak heart trying to be strong, a narrow mind blaming broadly. Outwardly, they appear pitiful, but inwardly, they lack compassion for themselves. Blaming fate is something the ancients particularly warned against. Because when people believe everything is predetermined, they become complacent. They don't strive, they don't improve, they don't accumulate virtue, and then they use the words fate to cover up their laziness and fear. The ancients said, "Fate is the beginning, fortune is the end." To blame fate for not cultivating good fortune is like sowing sand and then blaming the soil for not producing flowers. Kind-hearted people tend to be quieter and complain less when faced with adversity. They understand that every setback is a lesson. They may learn slowly, but if they don't learn, they'll remain stagnant for life. Those with evil hearts, on the other hand, become resentful of life and add more thorns to their hearts with each setback. Gradually, they lose faith in everyone, and no one truly wants to help them anymore. Ancient wisdom teaches that being around people who constantly blame others makes it difficult to retain good fortune. This is because such people lack a spirit of responsibility, humility, and the light of self-reflection. If it's unavoidable, then one shouldn't let their complaints get the better of one's mind. Hearing too much of it weighs heavily on the heart. Staying too long can easily lead to a distorted mind. To truly understand a person, observe their first reaction to failure. If it's "I wasn't good enough," they still have room for improvement. If it's because of others, circumstances, or fate, they are closing the door to their own good fortune. Understanding this will help you stop blaming others, stop resenting life, and turn inward to examine your own heart. As the ancients clearly stated, only those who bear the burden of their mistakes can bear the burden of blessings. Only those who dare to take responsibility can truly be masters of their own lives. 11. Among the manifestations that subtly erode one's good fortune, envy at seeing others better off than oneself is the most insidious poison. It is not loud, nor does it manifest immediately, but it gnaws at the heart day by day, turning a kind person into a bitter one without them even realizing it. The ancients said that when you see others doing well and feel uneasy, it's not because they are better than you, but because you haven't accepted yourself. Jealous people are often not lacking in talent, nor are they necessarily incompetent. What they lack is inner peace. When they see others succeed, be loved, or live better lives, instead of learning from them, they feel pain. This pain doesn't come from the outside, but from the silent comparison within their hearts. Initially, envy is just a slight feeling of resentment. Then comes thoughts like, why is that person so lucky? They must be involved in something shady. They must have been given preferential treatment. Over time, suspicion arises, and suspicion breeds resentment. People begin to speak ill of, belittle, or secretly wish for the other person's failure so they can feel better. The ancients called this poor in fortune because one's happiness is borrowed from the suffering of others. There's an old story about two students who studied under the same teacher. One was diligent, progressed quickly, and received praise from the teacher. The other was no less intelligent, but whenever he saw his friend being praised, he felt resentful. At first, it was just silence, then distance, and finally sarcastic remarks. The teacher noticed, called him over, and asked why he was no longer diligent. The student replied that the teacher was biased. The teacher just smiled and said, "I am not biased towards anyone. It's just that you have allowed your heart to be preoccupied with the success of others, leaving no room for yourself." Envy not only hurts others, but first and foremost, it hurts oneself. When the mind is constantly focused on comparing oneself to others, one gradually loses focus on one's own path. Time and energy that should be used for learning and self-improvement are instead wasted on comparison and resentment. The ancients said that a person who is envious is like carrying a hot stone in their heart. They cannot throw it away, nor can they let go, only burning themselves. Those who are fortunate are different. When they see others doing well, they don't rejoice loudly, but rather acknowledge it in their hearts. They understand that everyone has their own destiny and their own time. Just because others are ahead doesn't mean they will always be behind. Sometimes it's simply that they are walking on a different path. This inner peace helps them maintain a calm mind and avoid developing resentment. Ancient wisdom specifically warns that long-term jealousy will turn into evil. Because when people cannot tolerate the light of others, they will try to pull that light down. At that point, they no longer care about right and wrong, only about satisfying their own feelings of superiority and inferiority. Good fortune will therefore depart, because good fortune does not coexist with a narrow-minded heart. Even more frightening, envious people often don't realize they are envious. They always have reasons to justify themselves. They say they're only speaking the truth, only offering advice, only giving constructive criticism. But deep down, their motivation isn't to help others, but to alleviate their own insecurity. Ancient wisdom saw through this and taught that by observing a person's state of mind when others succeed, one can discern the depth of their heart. Jealousy also causes relationships to gradually break down. Others may not hear the words, but they will sense the gaze, attitude, and energy. Over time, they naturally distance themselves. The jealous person feels even more abandoned and continues to resent. A vicious cycle is formed, rooted in the inability to tolerate others being better than oneself. The ancients taught that the antidote to envy is knowing how to turn inward. Turn inward to look at your own path. Turn inward to ask yourself what you are lacking. Turn inward to cultivate your inner self. When a person truly focuses on becoming a better version of themselves, they no longer have time for envy. When their heart is full, they will see that the success of others does not take anything away from them. If you want to identify someone to avoid, observe how they react to the success of others. If they happily congratulate them, they are open-minded. If they remain silent but expressionless, they are still self-respecting. But if they are annoyed, sarcastic, or try to belittle you, it's a sign of an inner self lacking enlightenment. Understanding this isn't about judgment, but about self-reflection. Everyone experiences moments of sadness. The difference lies in the fact that some recognize and transform it, while others nurture it and let it erode their good fortune. The ancients said, "Only when your heart embraces others can your blessings embrace you." When you learn to rejoice in the good deeds of others, your path will naturally become wider, lighter, and brighter. 12. Not rejoicing in the good fortune of others is a very subtle sign of a narrow-minded heart. Ancient people considered this a dangerous state because it doesn't manifest in harsh words or wicked actions. Yet it silently depletes the blessings of the person experiencing it. When a person sees others experiencing good fortune, living well, and enjoying peace and happiness, and their heart remains cold, even resentful, it's no longer mere indifference, but a deviation from the path of enlightenment. The ancients said that blessings come not only from doing good deeds oneself, but also from the ability to rejoice in the good of others. When one sees others' well-being and feels joy in their heart, that blessing not only belongs to them, but also spreads to oneself. Conversely, when one sees good things but closes their heart, blessings are like a gentle breeze blowing through a closed door, unable to enter the house. There's an old story about two neighbors who ran a business together. One became fortunate, and his business prospered. The other wasn't disadvantaged. His life remained comfortable, but every time he heard about his neighbor's success, he felt uneasy. He didn't say anything, didn't do anything bad, but his expression turned cold, and he spoke less. He thought that he wasn't harming anyone. He was just unhappy. But gradually, this unhappiness withered his heart, making him see injustice everywhere and lacking enthusiasm in everything he did. In the end, their business declined, not because the other man took away their good fortune, but because they closed their hearts to what was good. The ancients saw deeply and said that the lack of joy at the good fortune of others often stems from comparison. When comparison arises, joy becomes conditional. When others prosper, one feels like they are losing out. But in reality, life is not a pie where some eat more and others eat less. Everyone has their own share. It's only narrow-mindedness that makes us think that the blessings of others are the blessings that have been taken away from us. Those who are unhappy often say, "I'm not envious, I just don't care." But the ancients made a clear distinction. Not caring means a calm, light, and unburdened heart. Unhappy, on the other hand, is a hard spot in the heart, a silent resistance. It is this hard spot that prevents the flow of energy in the mind, causing stagnation of vital energy and making it difficult for blessings to accumulate. Over time, people with this mindset will feel increasingly isolated, not because others distance themselves, but because they no longer have the warm energy to connect. When a person cannot rejoice in the good fortune of others, they are also unlikely to receive genuine blessings when they experience good luck. Relationships therefore become dull, not due to conflict, but due to a lack of heartfelt connection. Ancient wisdom teaches that joy is a form of self-cultivation. It requires no money, no effort, just an open heart. When you see others healthy, successful, and happy, and your heart feels lighter, you are quickly accumulating merit. This merit is not flashy, but lasting. Conversely, every time you see something good, but close your heart, you are cutting off a flow of goodness passing through you. Blessed people are often very simple in this regard. They don't need close relationships, nor do they need loud praise. As long as they feel no resentment or envy, that's enough. They understand that the light of others doesn't deepen their own shadows unless they themselves turn their backs on that light. Understanding this, we will be less critical of others, less self-compared, and learn to be more receptive to the good things in the world. For the ancients clearly stated that a joyful heart is the bridge to blessings. Whoever crosses that bridge will naturally find life lighter, warmer, and free from unnecessary detours. 13. Disregarding cause and effect and mocking morality are signs that one's inner self has strayed from the roots of enlightenment. Ancient wisdom always considered this a very dangerous sign, because when a person no longer believes that every action has consequences, they gradually lose the ability to discipline themselves. When morality is ridiculed, the very thing that keeps people virtuous also quietly slips away. The ancients said that karma is not meant to scare the weak, but to remind the wise to know when to stop and when to respect. Those who believe in karma do so not because they are superstitious, but because they understand that life has an invisible order. You reap what you sow, sooner or later, whether you have enough or not, only the timing is different. When a person disregards this, they will easily cross the boundary where they should have stopped. Those who mock morality often appear very shrewd. They say that in this day and age, there's no point in believing such things, that honest people suffer, and only the clever ones know how to seize immediate benefits. While this sounds sharp, it's actually short-sighted cleverness. The ancients called this shrewdness without a foundation, and the longer it's used, the more harm it causes. There's an old story about a very shrewd businessman with a sharp tongue who often mocked teachings about righteousness and morality. Whenever he saw someone doing good deeds without immediate reward, he'd call them foolish. He was cunning in business, exploiting the trust of others, and always prided himself on never being punished. Years passed, and he accumulated wealth and fame, but his family was uneasy. His children were at odds, and he lived in constant suspicion. He couldn't understand why. Despite his shrewdness, he still felt restless. In his old age, looking back, he realized he had never truly lived a peaceful day. The law of karma didn't take his money, but it took away his inner peace, something money can't buy. The ancients understood this deeply and taught that karmic retribution doesn't always manifest as obvious misfortune. Sometimes it's a restless mind, disturbed sleep, a constantly wary gaze, or unstable relationships. Those who mock this principle often think they've escaped karma, but in reality, they're paying the price in a different, more subtle and prolonged way. Disregarding the law of karma also makes people easily hurt others without feeling remorse. When they don't believe that their words and actions will return the favor, they are willing to lie, betray, and belittle others to gain advantage. Over time, their conscience hardens, and the sense of shame disappears. The ancients said that those who have lost their sense of shame are standing very close to the abyss, even if they outwardly smile and speak normally. More dangerously, those who mock morality often sow doubt in the hearts of those around them. They make others believe that living virtuously is naive, that upholding principles is self-inflicted suffering. When such thoughts spread, not only individuals, but entire groups lose their way. Therefore, the ancients always warned that destroying morality is like destroying the foundation of a house. When it collapses, no one can escape. Those who are blessed are different. They don't need to talk much about karma, nor do they try to prove anything. They simply quietly maintain their integrity in every small matter. When presented with an opportunity to do wrong without anyone knowing, they still refrain. When they suffer a loss and could complain, they choose silence and self-reflection. This isn't because they are weak, but because they understand that the price of losing their moral principles is always higher than any immediate gain. Ancient wisdom teaches that believing in karma doesn't slow people down, but helps them go further. Those who uphold moral principles have a solid foundation. They may not win quickly, but they win sustainably. They may not surpass others in the short term, but they will surpass them in the long run. Karma is like an underground stream. It's not immediately visible, but it determines the vitality of the entire land. Mocking morality often stems from arrogance. When a person believes they are outside the rules, they place themselves above the natural order. But the ancients clearly stated that the higher one rises with arrogance, the harder the fall. The law of cause and effect is not debated, not justified, and does not require belief to operate. Those who believe will avoid it, while those who don't will still suffer, albeit in ignorance. Understanding this, we will stop ridiculing seemingly outdated teachings and learn to respect the principles that have kept humanity from going astray for generations. For the ancients reminded us that respecting karma is respecting oneself, while disregarding morality is cutting off one's own path to blessings, even if outwardly one seems to be progressing rapidly. 14. Finding fault with others to mask one's own arrogant ego is a very subtle manifestation of a distorted mind. Ancient people considered this the most difficult form of evil to recognize, because it often masquerades as righteous, straightforward, and constructive criticism. Outwardly, it seems to be for the sake of right and proper, but deep down it is a need to elevate oneself by bringing others down. The ancients said that truly virtuous people look at their own faults first, while arrogant people look at the faults of others first. When someone constantly scrutinizes the flaws of others, it's not because they are exceptionally wise, but because there is a void in their heart that needs to be filled. That void is their insecurity about their own worth. Initially, a habit of finding fault might stem from a judgmental mindset. Seeing others make mistakes, they immediately point them out, sometimes even feeling a sense of satisfaction at being right. But gradually, it becomes a need. They need to see others make mistakes to feel superior. If they can't find fault, they'll try to overthink it. If the fault is small, they exaggerate it. If it's not bad enough, they'll add ulterior motives. The ancients called this the mentality of winning and losing, which grows stronger the more it's nurtured, and the more it obscures one's conscience. There's an old story about a learned man who loved to discuss moral principles. Whenever someone did something imperfect, he would immediately analyze where the mistake was, why it was wrong, and how blameworthy they were. Initially, people respected him for his knowledge. But over time, everyone became wary of being near him, because every story could become an excuse for his judgment. When someone offered constructive criticism, he would immediately become angry, believing they were unwilling to listen. Ultimately, he lived in solitude, still believing he had been misunderstood by the world. Not because the world was cruel, but because his heart no longer had room for tolerance. Pointing out others' faults often goes hand in hand with never reflecting on oneself. When someone points out their mistakes, they will justify themselves, refute it, or shift the blame to others. The ancients said that those who refuse to admit their mistakes cannot correct themselves, and without self-correction, all teachings are useless. Arrogance is the greatest obstacle on the path to self-cultivation. More dangerously, those who constantly find fault often hurt others without realizing it. They use the guise of honesty to utter harsh words. They use constructive criticism to wound others' self-esteem. Over time, they create a heavy atmosphere where no one dares to open up, no one dares to make mistakes, and no one dares to be themselves. As a result, good fortune departs, because good fortune is not found where there is a lack of warmth. Ancient people clearly distinguished between constructive criticism and fault-finding. Contribution stems from a desire for others to improve, so words are measured and compassionate. Fault-finding, on the other hand, arises from ego, so words are condescending, even if masked by reason. Those who receive constructive criticism may feel hurt, but still grateful. Those who are found fault only feel insulted and become defensive. There are people who never accomplish great things in their lives, yet are very good at pointing out the mistakes of others. The ancients called this small intellect, great heart. They use cunning to mask their lack of self-cultivation. Instead of elevating themselves through action, they choose to drag others down with words. This path may bring a temporary sense of superiority, but in the long run, it only leads to isolation. Focusing on others' faults is also a way to avoid confronting oneself. When the mind is constantly preoccupied with the mistakes of others, we no longer have time to examine our own inner selves. This provides temporary security for the ego, but it also causes stagnation. The ancients said that those who dare not acknowledge their own faults live their entire lives in their own shadow. Those who are fortunate are different. They see others' faults, but don't rush to point them out. They understand that everyone has their own journey and their own lessons to learn. When they need to offer advice, they choose a time when the other person is open-minded, and they choose a way of speaking that won't hurt. More importantly, they spend more time improving themselves than trying to fix others. It is this humility that earns them increasing respect. The ancients taught that an arrogant ego is like a blurry mirror. When the mirror is blurry, everyone looks distorted. To see life more clearly, one must first clean the mirror of the heart. When the heart is less arrogant, the gaze will soften. When the gaze softens, the words will be gentle. When the words are gentle, blessings will naturally remain. If you want to identify someone you should keep your distance from, observe how they speak about the mistakes of others. If they express compassion and a desire to help, they possess virtue. If they gloat and belittle, they are driven by their ego. Spending time with such people can easily infect your mind with judgment and anxiety. Understanding this isn't about looking down on others, but about self-preservation. Everyone sees others' faults at some point. The difference is that some people stop and look inward, while others nurture it and turn it into a habit. The ancients subtly but profoundly reminded us that seeing others' faults is wisdom, but not dwelling on them is virtue. When you let go of the habit of finding fault, you not only preserve your blessings, but also maintain a rare sense of peace amidst the many challenges of life. 15. Outwardly friendly, but inwardly malicious is a typical example of a two-faced lifestyle that the ancients always advised against. This type of person doesn't need to openly commit evil. Simply being around them long enough can cause others unease and diminish their good fortune without them knowing why. The harm they inflict doesn't come from direct actions, but from cleverly concealed hypocrisy. The ancients said that sincere people speak consistently, while hypocritical people smile outwardly, but have cold hearts. Two-faced people are often very good at creating a sense of security. In front of others, they appear caring, gentle, and understanding. They say things that make others open up, trust, and even rely on them. But behind their backs, the very things they heard become material for gossip, distortion, or their own selfish purposes. Initially, the other person often doesn't realize it. Everyone tends to trust kindness expressed directly. Only when private conversations are leaked, stories are distorted, or relationships suddenly change, do people become alarmed. But at that point, it's difficult to trace back, because two-faced people always leave themselves a way out. They say they didn't mean any harm, that they only mentioned it unintentionally, or that others misunderstood. There's an old story about a villager known for his amiable nature. Anyone in trouble would seek him out to confide in him. He listened attentively, nodding, sighing, and offering words of sympathy. But during other tea gatherings, he was the best storyteller, revealing detailed accounts of others' private lives. He didn't curse, only spoke with a tone of pity. However, this very storytelling damaged others' reputations and strained relationships. Over time, suspicion and distrust spread throughout the village. When the truth came out, he simply smiled and said he hadn't made it up. But his good fortune vanished, for no one dared believe him or approach him. The ancients clearly saw the true nature of this type of person. They don't directly commit evil, but they create an environment for negativity to spread. Words spoken behind someone's back are like an undercurrent. Their direction is unseen, but they are enough to shake the foundations of many relationships. Two-faced people often consider themselves knowledgeable, But in reality, they are living by sowing discord. The root cause of this lifestyle is often insecurity and a need for validation. When lacking intrinsic value, people easily seek a sense of importance by possessing information about others. Knowing secrets makes them feel superior, entitled to judge, and entitled to recount events. But this very feeling fuels a distorted ego and erodes character. Ancient wisdom teaches that words are the source of both fortune and misfortune. Those who appear friendly on the surface, but speak hurtful words behind someone's back, often don't realize their own wickedness because they don't yell or directly insult. But this deceptive gentleness is even more dangerous, as it lulls others into a false sense of security. When hurt, people suffer not only from the words themselves, but also from the betrayal. Being around two-faced people can be very tiring. You never know when your words might be taken elsewhere. You have to be cautious, reserved, and withdrawn. Over time, you lose your naturalness and sense of security in your relationships. The ancients said that where there is no sincerity, lasting happiness cannot be nurtured. Good people are different. They don't speak with a double tongue. If they are dissatisfied, they choose to remain silent or speak frankly with respect. If they hear private matters, they keep them to themselves, not using them as topics for amusement. They understand that keeping one's mouth shut is also a way of preserving virtue. By not harming the honor of others, they are also protecting themselves from invisible resentments. The ancients taught that you should observe a person's demeanor when they speak of someone absent. If their words are compassionate and measured, they are virtuous. If their words are full of detail and glee, you should keep your distance. For the way a person treats someone who is absent clearly shows how they will treat you when you turn your back. Living a double life only makes the person who does it increasingly isolated. Outwardly, they may have many relationships and stories, but there is no genuine trust. They are always trying to maintain a facade, always remembering what they said to whom. Their minds are therefore never at peace. The ancients called this self-inflicted suffering, not something that needs to be punished by anyone else. Sadly, many people only realize this when they've lost all faith in those around them. When there's no one left to confide in, no one to open up to, they feel empty. But by then, it's harder to change, because the habit of gossiping behind someone's back has become deeply ingrained. Our ancestors didn't teach us to hate this kind of person, but to be discerning. Not everyone who smiles at us is on the same path. Not every gentle word comes from a kind heart. Keeping your distance from two-faced people isn't being cold, but rather protecting your own well-being. More importantly, the ancients reminded us to reflect on ourselves. Because sometimes, unintentionally, we might recount other people's stories without thinking about the consequences. Cultivating the mind begins with controlling one's speech and heart, even when no one is watching. When words are consistent and the mind is neither inside nor out, that is when a person is closer to true peace. The ancients believed that what was said was subtle yet profound. Those who appear kind on the outside but harm others behind their backs will see their blessings fade away. Those who are consistent in their inner and outer selves, however slow, will go far. Understanding this will help us know who to be close to and who to keep away, and most importantly, how to maintain an honest heart amidst a world full of masks. Ancient wisdom teaches that in life, not everyone who appears is a blessing, and not everyone who causes us distress needs to be resented or avoided for life. For some people, the right thing to do is not to sever ties, but simply to maintain a sufficient distance. This distance doesn't come from coldness, but from the clear-headedness gained after understanding the true nature of people's hearts. Many people mistakenly believe that spiritual practice means withdrawing from the world, retreating to a quiet place, and cutting off all contact. But the ancients never taught that. True spiritual practice is living in the world with an undisturbed mind, knowing who to associate with, choosing relationships to nurture, and knowing when to stop before things subtly erode your blessings. Some people only need a polite greeting, some should be kept at a moderate level, and some, if you get too close, will sooner or later cause you unease. Life is short and mental energy is limited. Every time you come into contact with malicious people, two-faced individuals, or those who sow suspicion or gossip, you are paying the price with your own peace of mind. Initially, it may just be a vague feeling of discomfort, but gradually, it leads to fatigue, doubt, and even the loss of your inherent innocence. The ancients called this unconsciously depleting one's blessings. Keeping distance isn't about fear, but about self-respect. It's not about being superior to others, but about understanding what one needs to live peacefully. Wise people don't try to change everyone, nor do they foolishly sacrifice their own peace to prove their kindness. They understand that boundless kindness becomes a burden, while clear-headedness is the root of lasting happiness. When you know when to take a step back, you'll find your mind lightened. No more explaining, no more struggling to endure, no more wondering why you feel uneasy when you're around someone. The right distance will restore clarity of thought and peace of mind. That's when you begin your spiritual practice in everyday life, without needing a monk's robe, just a discerning mind. The ancients once said that only those who maintain a clear mind amidst the turmoil of life are truly strong. There's no need for winning or losing, no need to expose flaws. Just know your limits. When you don't allow anyone to intrude on your inner self, good fortune will naturally remain. If this video helped you realize something important, please leave the word "wake up" in the comments as a reminder for yourself. Share this video with your loved ones. Perhaps they also need a gentle wake-up call. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can learn together how to maintain a pure heart and preserve blessings amidst life's many changes.